Okay. So that was your panel on possibilities for peace in the future. And after that, I think it's critical that we hear the voices for change. So allow me to introduce the last and final panel, Healing Yemen from War, Messages from Nobel Prize Laureates. I'm going to introduce our distinguished presenter for today. Ghida Fakhry, who you met a few minutes ago, is a presenter at TRT World. She hosts the network's flagship political program from Washington, D.C., Bigger Than Five. She's also the moderator for the Doha debates. She was previously lead anchor for Al Jazeera English, presenting the network's NewsHour and award-winning program Witness. She has reported extensively from the United Nations, conducted interviews with heads of states and heads of government and international officials, and moderates high-level panels at the United Nations, the World Bank, and leading NGOs. She's a contributor to the Huffington Post, where she writes primarily on U.S. foreign policy and global affairs. Please join me in welcoming Ghida Fakhry.
Thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction, Dalia, and thank you all very much for being here. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to this session, the final session of the day, on Healing Yemen from War, Messages from the Nobel Peace Laureates. I'm deeply honored, actually, to be sharing the stage with these four distinguished Nobel Peace Laureates. Yemen, as we all know, and we've been talking about this all day today, has been called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, an overwhelming humanitarian calamity, the worst place on earth for children. And these are descriptions that have been made by senior United Nations officials. Yemen has also been a place where the youth has been described as a lost generation, victims of violence, war, and famine. The war continues and the statistics continue to get worse. More than 20 million Yemenis, 2/3 of the population, do not have access to food. 14 million have been pushed to the brink of famine. 2.5 million internally displaced. 3 million Yemeni youth, perhaps many more, unemployed. And these numbers keep going up. And of course, let's not forget the victims of the ongoing military campaign that has been waging in the country for the past 4 or 5 years. The conflict has entered its 5th year, and there seems little sign of an end to it. But on this panel today, we want to try and explore some of the potential solutions. What needs to take place for Yemen to eventually make a transition to peace, justice, reconciliation, and reconstruction. We are indeed privileged to have with us 4 extraordinary women Nobel Peace Laureates. They are extraordinary, not because they are winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, but they have indeed won the Nobel Peace Prize because they are truly exceptional and truly special women who have all done a lot within their own countries for their causes and internationally as well. Strong advocates, strong activists who have each taken up a cause and made a significant difference. So I'm deeply honored to be here with you all today. And on the eve of International Women's Day, perhaps fitting to start talking about where women fit in nation building and peace building. Let me just very briefly introduce each one of the panelists, though you know them all very well. But to my right, Tawakkol Karman, who became the first Yemeni, indeed the first Arab woman, and the second Muslim woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. She also was the youngest at the time, at the age of 32.
And now one of the oldest.
No, one of the oldest, not quite. Shirin Ebadi to my left, of course, the 2003 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, one of the first chief justices in her country, Iran, the first Muslim woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and only the 5th Muslim to receive a Nobel Prize in any field. Lima Bowi received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for her work in leading women's peace movements that brought an end to the Second Civil War in Liberia. She shared that prize with fellow Liberian Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Tawakkol Karman, in fact. A pleasure to have you as well, Lima Bowi. And last but not least, Jody Williams, who received the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1997 for her militant work to ban landmines through the international campaign to ban landmines. So a very important issue as well. At the time, Jody Williams became the 10th woman and 3rd American woman in the Nobel's almost 100-year history. So well done to everyone, and a pleasure to be with you here. So as we were saying earlier, on the eve of International Women's Day, where do women fit on the spectrum of peace building in countries that have gone through conflicts? How do these 4 women, Nobel Peace Laureates, see the situation unfolding and continuing in Yemen? What do their different experiences offer in terms of ideas and solutions as Yemen tries to emerge from its current predicament? So let me begin with you, Tawakkol Karman. You, as everyone here knows, became the mother of the revolution in your native Yemen. As a human rights activist, as a journalist, as a politician, a senior member of the Al-Islah political movement, Al-Islah meaning reform, how do you assess the role women have and can play in the struggle for peace in Yemen?
Okay, thank you so much. If you want to talk about the role of women in Yemen, you should talk about 2 periods. Before the revolution and after the revolution. I don't want to talk about the history because we have a lot of history of the great participation, political participation of women in Yemen, especially we were ruled by the greatest woman queen in Peninsula, in the world, Queen of Sheba, you know, Bilqis, and Queen Arwa. So we have a great history with political participation of women, and we have a great history of political struggle in the women's rights and human rights. But let's talk about the women rule under the tyranny ruling. And sorry for my English, by the way, if I did any mistake. So if I talk about the rule of women under the rule of the dictator, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and after the revolution. Under the ruling of Ali Abdullah Saleh, woman was played a very decor rule, as with every dictator in the region and with every dictator around the world. So they use women as a decor to make their image better. They said, okay, we include women in some seats of parliament or in some seats in the government, and we have just one woman in the government, and they say, oh, we gave woman her right. The same thing with her in the parliament, etc., etc. But the real rule, the real right for women in the legislations, in the constitution, in the law was absence, because the absence of the will of the dictator. And woman was playing a traditional role. If she play a good role in the society, so she should make it in the women environment. And there is a great woman, strong woman, who made it something exceptional. But in general, no. In the peaceful revolution, women in Yemen, as well as women in all Arab region, decided to play another role, which is to be leader, not victim. So when we talk about the hardest part of political participation of women, there is nothing hard to be part of the revolution against tyranny and to lead the street for freedom, justice, and democracy. And also to write the constitution. And that is what exactly happened in Yemen. When millions of women went to the street, struggled for freedom, justice, and democracy. And they faced the violence of the dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh with flowers, with singing. And that was the most important moment that transferred Yemen from an armed society to a peaceful society. So when we talk about war in Yemen and how we stop war in Yemen, you should know that women stopped war in Yemen when they decided to make peaceful revolution against the dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh. Because the peaceful revolution was our tools to save our countries from wars inside the country that the world didn't hear about it. Under the rule of Ali Abdullah Saleh, he waged tens of wars, sectarian, between cities, regions, between tribes, but women did it a great way when they decided to tell her, to force him to resign. And the second thing, in the transitional period, she participated in the national dialogue. She was the most active one, and the best article was written by her hand. She participated in the Constitution, and she wrote in the Constitution she participated in the Constitution on writing all the democrat things that we struggle for: women's rights, kids' rights, etc. Third thing, which is now women under the counter-revolution. Now women, also children, are the most vulnerable one, not because of the peaceful revolution, because of they are targeted by the counter-revolution entities and countries.
And just bringing it up to today and what is going on, there have been meetings involving Yemeni parties in Stockholm under the aegis of the United Nations. But how do you see these prospects for peace and reconciliation if, one, the foreign powers that are fueling this conflict are not at the table, nor are the women?
If the foreign countries are not with us, are not feeding the conflict in Yemen, you will see Yemen something else. If I understand the question. So, if these foreigners let Yemenis alone, let women alone, you will see Yemen really go to be democratic country. Who won Nobel Peace Prize? Is the Yemeni people. The peaceful people who throw their weapons, and the women there who throw so the conspired from the international community and the regional make all this collapse. Now Stockholm Agreement is very important step for peace, for creating peace in Yemen. But unfortunately, there is many misleading things inside it. There is no really explanation from the United Nations about what is inside it. So it will collapse, and also there is no real implementation from the international community from one side, and from the parties from Houthis and from the Saudi and Emirates.
Okay, Shirin Ebadi, moving on to you, looking at the issue of transitional justice in Yemen. As someone who served as president of the City Court of Tehran in the years leading up to the revolution, someone who, as I said earlier, was the first Iranian woman to become Chief Justice, how do you see what is happening in Yemen, and how do you view the talks that we just mentioned taking part without the major foreign parties, whether it's Iran, Saudi Arabia, or others, and without women at the table?
سلام علیکم. خیلی خوشحالم که مسئله رو با یه موضوعی شروع کردید که اساساً به کل خاورمیانه مربوط میشه.
So good afternoon. I'm very glad that you opened on a subject that goes back to the whole of Middle East.
در سال 1979 یک انقلاب اسلامی شد که این انقلاب اسلامی در ایران تأثیر گذاشت در کل خاورمیانه.
In 1979, there was an Islamic revolution in Iran that impacted all of the Middle East.
و در حقیقت از اون تاریخ اسلام سیاسی به دنیا آمد.
So from that date, in reality, political Islam was born.
و از اون تاریخ می‌بینیم ما عملیات انتحاری چقدر زیاد شد در اون منطقه.
And from that date, we are witnessing how people kill themselves, meaning suicide bombers.
در سال 1979 اسلام سیاسی در ایران متولد شد و 2 سال بعد حزب الله لبنان تشکیل شد.
So in 1979, after the political Islamic being born in Iran, the Hezbollah in Lebanon was formed. This was only 2 years later.
شما تأثیر اسلام سیاسی رو در سوریه و در عراق و در یمن میبینید.
And you can now see the impact of political Islam in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen.
و همچنین فقط برای اینکه تز دولت ایران این بود که انقلابش رو صادر بکنه.
Because the thesis that the government of Iran used was to export its revolution.
من قبل از انقلاب رئیس دادگاه بودم و بعد به من گفتن که چون تو زنی نمیتونی رئیس بشی و من رو کردم منشی همون دادگاه.
So before the revolution, I presided a court in Iran. However, after the revolution, I was informed that being a woman, I could not preside over a court, so I was demoted and became the clerk of my own court.
و همینطور البته من قبول نکردم و آمدم بیرون و دفتر وکالت خودم رو دایر کردم.
Of course, I didn't accept that. I left the judiciary. I went back to private practice and started my own practice.
قبل از اینکه اجازه بدین به عنوان یک ایرانی از تمام مردم یمن به خاطر دخالت‌های حکومت خودم در یمن و کمک به حوثی‌ها که باعث تشدید جنگ شده معذرت بخوام.
First of all, I want to ask the pardon of all the Yemeni people, and I want to apologize to all of them because of the influence of my country on the Houthis who have actually set fire to the war going on in Yemen.
و همچنین از تمام مردم خاورمیانه به نیابت از مردم ایران معذرت میخوام که اسلام سیاسی رو ما ایجاد کردیم و سعی کردیم که صادر کنیم به بقیه کشورها و اونا رو خراب کردیم.
Also, I want to apologize to all of the people of the Middle East on behalf of the people of Iran, where we created political Islam and exported it to other countries and ruined their countries.
من مسلمان هستم و پراکتیس هم میکنم، به دین خودم افتخار دارم، ولی که اسلام بایستی در منزل باشه و اگر به قدرت سیاسی تبدیل بشود یک فاجعه است.
I'm a practicing Muslim and I'm proud of my religion, but religion has to stay at home. If Islam becomes the political power, it can be very dangerous.
در مورد یمن فقط بعد از انقلاب نیست که حکومت ایران دخالت میکنه، قبل از انقلاب هم ما در یمن دخالت میکردیم.
But it's not only after the revolution that Iran is intervening and meddling in Yemen. Even prior to the revolution, we did meddle in Yemen.
همونطوری که می‌دانید در دهه 60 میلادی یک جنگ داخلی یمن بود بین یمن شمالی و جنوبی و اون موقع دولت ایران به طرفداری از آمریکا وارد این جنگ شد و خلبان‌های ما وارد شدند.
So during the 60s, when there was a civil war going on between the north and the south, and fortunately Iranian pilots got involved on behalf of the United States.
و بعد از اینکه انقلاب شد متاسفانه با تز صدور انقلاب اسلامی دولت ایران به حوثی‌ها کمک کرد.
And unfortunately, after the revolution, Iranian government wanting to export the revolution, they started helping the Houthis.
و عبدالمالک حوثی رهبر حوثی‌ها چندین سال در مدرسه حوزیه قم تحصیل مذهبی میکرد.
And Abdul Malik Houthi, who is the leader of the Houthis in Yemen, went to school in Iran, went to the Qom seminary and studied there for years.
و تعدادی از خانواده‌های رهبران حوثی اونا هنوز در اینا تو ایران، اینا رو فرستادن ایران، تو ایران زندگی میکنن.
And there are many Houthi families, families of leaders of Houthis who live in Iran now.
مسئله که باید اینجا ما روشن بکنیم این است که چرا همه مایل به دخالت در امور یمن هستند.
So what we need to talk about here today is why is it that everyone wants to intervene in Yemen?
عربستان و امارات مرتکب جنایت شدند.
Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have committed crimes.
ایران دخالت میکنه.
Iran intervenes.
و علت چیه؟ آیا یمن یه تیکه جواهره؟
So why is it that Yemen has been picked for that? Is it a piece of jewelry?
همیشه تو این کشور جنگ بوده. این علتش چیه؟
So why is it that there's always a war going on in this country? Why?
علاوه بر این که یمن از قبیله های مختلفه که به هر حال جنگ رقابت سیاسی رقابت قدرت بین اون قبیله ها هست.
In addition to the fact that we know there are tribes in Yemen and they may be fighting for power,
یمن موقعیت سوق‌الجیشی بسیار مهمی داره و اون تسلط بر باب المندبه.
but the fact that Bab al-Mandab is located there and geopolitically that's extremely important.
و میدونیم که نفت اون منطقه از دو تنگه هرمز و باب المندب به اقیانوس راه داره.
So we know that both the Straits of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab al-Mandab are used for oil exports from that region.
تنگه هرمز در خاک ایران و دولت ایران بهش مسلطه.
So the Hormuz Strait is in the land of Iran and Iran has control over it.
بنابراین دولت ایران بسیار علاقمنده که از طریق حوثی‌ها باب المندب رو هم داشته باشه.
And the government of Iran is very likely and very loves maybe the control of Bab al-Mandab, which is another strait that's used for the export of oil.
و الان جنگ حدیده که خیلی به شدت جریان داره برای این است که حوثی‌ها مسلط بر باب المندبند و میخواستن عربستان میخواست اینا رو بیرون کنه.
And we know that the city of Hodeidah has been under the control of the Houthis and the Saudi Arabia is trying to get them out of there. So the war is going on in a very critical shape there.
و عربستان سعودی و ائتلاف به شدت اونجا رو بمباران کردن و مردم غیر نظامی زیادی کشته شدن.
And although Saudi Arabia and the coalition have bombed there many times, many civilians have been killed as well.
اما موفق نشدن.
But they haven't succeeded.
و هنوزم بر باب المندب تسلط کامل ندارن.
And it looks like they cannot control Bab al-Mandab completely.
و کشتی‌هایی که میان به یمن بایستی از اون طریق از غذا و اسلحه برسونن.
And that's how boats and ships bring weapons and food to Yemen.
و متاسفانه حوثی‌ها سازمان ملل گزارش کرده که حوثی‌ها این بعضی از این بسته‌های غذایی رو فروختن و به مردم ندادن.
And according to a report of the United Nations, it looks like the Houthis have taken and confiscated the food and or sold it to other people without giving it to the ones who are in need of food.
و به عنوان حرف‌های نهایی بایستی بگم که یمن متعلق به مردم یمنه و سرنوشت یمن رو مردم یمن بایستی تعیین کنن نه دولت‌های خارجی.
So I have to say that Yemen belongs to the people of Yemen and the destiny of Yemen should be made by the people of Yemen, not foreign governments.
آمریکا، عربستان، امارات، ایران همشون باید گمشن برن بیرون. لعنت الله علیهم.
America, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Iran have to get lost. Damn all of them.
آمریکا بایستی فروش اسلحه رو هم به عربستان و به منطقه ممنوع بکنه. اونجا شده انبار باروت و داره دنیا رو با آتیش میکشه.
America has to stop selling weapons to that region. That region has become a bomb. It's going to explode.
و آخرین حرف.
Last word.
طبق قطعنامه 1325 در مذاکرات صلح بایستی زنها شرکت بکنن.
Based on the 1325 of the UN Security Council, women have to participate in peace talks.
تا الان در مذاکرات صلحی که بوده یه دونه زن شرکت نکردن و همش مردان نشستن حرف زدن، مردایی که فقط دعوا کردن بلدن.
Up to now, no woman has participated in any peace talks, and it's only been men who, the only thing that men know is how to fight. They've been on peace tables.
لطفاً مردا پاشن حالا زنا بشینن که حرف بزنن.
So let's ask men to stand up and leave and let women sit down.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ebadi. I have a whole bunch of follow-up questions for you, but I will just hold it until a little later, and we'll talk about what kind of justice you think should be best served in the case of Yemen. You've mentioned all the culprits and all of the different players involved. But let me move on, if I can, to Lima Bowi first. Leymah, talk to us, if you can, about the responsibilities of civil society. We've been talking about these cultures of violence, of men being involved in the decision-making, the peacemaking, women not being quite as present. How important is it for you, do you think, to have the civic and political engagement of women, and what kind of lessons can we glean from the Liberian context if we look at what's going on in Yemen, even though the conflict is hugely different, of course?
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Tawakkol, for pulling this off with the Fordham University family. And you rightly said it, the context that I come from is totally different from what is happening. But what I also know is that whilst contexts of wars may be different, the content, the experiences, and some of the solutions are similar. Humanitarian catastrophe has no border. So rape is rape, killings are killings, hunger is hunger, internal displacement and refugee lives are all the same, whether it's in Africa or it's in the Middle East or it's somewhere else in the world. So whilst the context may be different, the humanitarian catastrophe that the people of Yemen are facing now is the same that we faced several years ago in Liberia. You cannot overstate the involvement of civil society. The previous panel talked about people-centered, and there is no way we can have peace in any region of the world if the peace is without the involvement of the ordinary people. The analogy that I would give is, for example, this is a house where you have a father, you have a mother, and you have your children, and the house catches on fire, and then you're saying, let's just sit and wait for the outsiders to come and pour water on the fire. Or the outsiders are saying to the father, mother, and children in the house, don't get involved, don't touch anything until we try to figure out where the fire came from, how it came from. What is going to happen to that house is that it's going to burn. That's the first thing. The second thing is you can't start to deal with that fire if you have 5 daughters and 2 sons, and you're saying to the sons and the father, you be the ones to put the fire out. First thing first, the daughters, you need their hands, you need their intellect. So that's the case for involving women in the entire process. So civil society involvement is very key. Liberia, as you know, went to war, and we stayed at war for 14 years. When we went to war, we were about 3.2 million people. That was our population. Almost 10% of our population was wiped out as a result of the war. We lost 250,000 people. 1 million went into internally displaced camps, and 500,000 were refugees in different regions across Africa. We signed many peace agreements, maybe over a dozen. And every time the warlords would come back to say, oh, sorry, yes, I signed, but that was not my actual signature. During the entire process of the Liberian War, there was never women's involvement on the peace table. In 2003, not only did the women decide to launch a nonviolent action, but there was a conglomeration of civil society actors who decided it's about time for all of us to join hands and get involved in the peace process. So we came to peace, but the caution that I want to give the Yemeni people is that when we're talking about war and finding solutions to war, we're so focused on ending the violence that we never really try to do any form of strategy for nation building. So right now, everyone is just focused on, let's just end the war, which is well and good. But I think there needs to be a group of people in one room sitting down and saying, how do we redo Yemen after the guns have been silent? You need that kind of strategic thinking. Because then these people have clarity. The mistake we made when we're looking for peace in Liberia was that we're only advocating for peace and not really thinking about the involvement of the youth, the involvement of the women. So yes, we came to the place where we had Africa's first elected female president. But the sad news is that we never really got the kind of parity in government that we should have had. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what would peace look like for the people of Yemen? Someone on the last panel talked about Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I was laughing because that is the general package that everyone tends to figure along with the UN that will unveil peace to nations, peace talk, Peace and Reconciliation Commission, disarmament, demobilization, elections. And what we've seen time and again is that these formulas should not be a one-size-fits-all as the rest of the world tend to see it. First thing first, you need to ask the people in Yemen, is Truth and Reconciliation Commission really the way forward at the end of the war? Remember, you have ethnic crisis. Every valiant in the north is a hero to his people, and every hero in the south is a valiant in the north. So when you decide that we're going to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission or a war crimes court, remember that there would always be a clash because one warlord is seen as the hero for his people while on the other side. So how do we find something that everyone agrees with? That's the first thing. The second thing you need to recognize as we talk about engagement, I like the fact that everyone says R-E, at the end of war, reintegration, rehabilitation, reconciliation, everything RE stands for, we're doing it over. So the question now is, as you're doing it over, what are those things that you're already fast-tracking in this peace process or in the process of looking for peace that is different from the old ways? For example, the involvement of women. I must say it was a really fantastic panel, the last panel. But I have to be a bit problematic to say that when there was the mention of women, the moderator, who did a very good job, was quick to pass over that. I don't know if I was the only one because I'm a feminist, no if, no buts, no whatever. You know, but he quickly passed over it when I thought that was the opportunity to really question the men on the panel, how they saw the involvement of women. Saying women should be involved is not enough. Getting the men to say this is something that we really think is necessary. If you have 51% of the population outside of a process, that process will never work. If you have gender-based violence as a key part of some of the reasons for war in the first place, you need the voices of women to come and be a part of it. Finally, when we say we're engaging women, we really need to start to think about what power they bring. If you go into Yemen today, I'm sure like Liberia, in communities, it's the women who are keeping it together. And the questions we need to ask now is, in the midst of crisis, how are you doing it? How are you harnessing your power? Once we find that, or how do we engage that power and continue to involve these women in the process of peace building? When we talk about transitional justice and the other panelists talk about we need to lock them up, let's be very realistic. The World War I and II ended years ago. They're still arresting people. Timing is very key for justice. No one is saying impunity, but let the whole strategy for justice be timed in a way that it is working alongside peace. One of the mistakes that we make, those of us coming from the global south and from different parts, is that we look at what happened in Europe and America and try to use it as a yardstick for solving our problems. Context is different, content is the same. Humanitarian catastrophe has no borders, but let's be very wise as we try to unveil peace to our people. Thank you.
So lots of very interesting concepts there that you mentioned, Leymah, Gbowee, that I would like Jody Williams perhaps to touch on and expand. Just a quick mention, Jody Williams, that since your protests against the Vietnam War, all the way back then, you've been quite a strong peace activist, trying to reclaim the meaning of peace, which you believe, I suppose, goes way beyond the concept of just laying down your arms and absence of armed conflict. So taking what you've heard here today and keeping in mind that there seems to be quite an extent of apathy, indifference in the West, in many parts of the world, about what's going on in Yemen, despite the incredible numbers of killed every day and the destruction that the country has suffered over the past 5 years. What do you think is missing? When we talk about the responsibility of regional powers in starting the war in Yemen and perpetuating it, how do you stop this war? And do we somehow need some kind of a Jody Williams campaign to spur outrage, to get us all out there? Or are governments starting to get it? Are they starting to get it? There is some pressure on the British government and on the US government as well to stop the arms sales at least. Where do you see this heading?
My first response about the regional powers would be echoing my sister Shirin Ebadi, but I would say it a little more harshly because I am a harsh person. Throw the bastards out. You know, and then let the people of Yemen figure it out. That's one part. But I have, a couple of things have stuck in my mind as I have listened to everything. And you are correct, I was radicalized by the Vietnam War. I woke up to the fact that my government is a military oppressor. And in various ways, I have fought against the United States military interventions and oppressions ever since. I had a lot of experience in Central America during the 1980s when the US was training and supporting death squads and fun people like that. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it was Dr. Dahlia, if I destroy your name, I so apologize. Fahmy, is that right? Right. Near the end of that second panel, she asked a question that to me was fundamental and critical. And it was, okay, you can bring peace, but how do we address the culture of violence? Nobody answered it. I mean, that's a tough one. And then in the previous panel, there was the discussion of, at some point, all wars end, or the point being made, and that's true. But then there was another point, which was how. And I think in various ways, all of us on panels have been addressing parts of the how. It is fundamental to achieving sustainable peace that the how is deeply thought through, as my sister Leymah just said. When I think of the culture of violence, that is another layer that was alluded to yet not touched upon when we were talking about the layers of the US and the UK and Iran and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's the layer of men thinking that they're the only ones who know how to do it, right? Voices of women are not important. The men carry the guns, ergo, women have nothing to say in peace. And that has to be addressed in some way, and I'm not saying in the context of solving the issue of Yemen, but women, as we are seeing over and over and over again, are increasingly sick of having to ask men if we have a place at the table. And everybody who has talked about the how, in a meaningful way, in my view, has recognized that if you do not involve all segments of society in some meaningful way in the dialogue, discussion, implementation of peace, you will not have peace. Ultimately, you will return to war. In my experience in El Salvador, it was a proxy war between the Soviet bloc and my country, it was Ronnie Reagan drawing the line against communism in Central America before they entered Harlingen, Texas, and took over America, which was ridiculous. There was only one operating elevator in Nicaragua at the time. I mean, how they were going to intervene and invade us was beyond my comprehension. Finally, the war came to an end, not because anybody won, but because the Soviet Union collapsed and the US didn't need its proxy war anymore. So the peace agreement in Salvador, and of course, some gentleman said you should just sit down the 8 most important dudes with guns. He didn't say it this way. Dudes with guns, and let them sort it out. That's what they did in Salvador, essentially, and I think they've done it in most peace agreements, right? You bring all the men who have waged the war together so they can figure out how they're going to divide power. Let's take away I have a little more power than you, so I'm taking more of your guns, the whole shtick. So 3/4 of the document of the peace accord of El Salvador was how you do that. How do you get the opposition guerrillas into camps? How do you then take away their guns? How do you try to retrain them to be wonderful citizens of a war-torn society? And the other elements, and they said this essentially in the last couple of pages, all those other socioeconomic, trauma questions, we'll deal with that after the peace. Because you can't really talk about those peripheral issues if you don't have peace. As long as you see the participation of women, youth, civil society, men who are not interested in shooting each other, if you do not include them in the process at the time you're negotiating it, I believe you are really setting up the situation for a future conflict, sooner or later. Peace is not, as you said, the mere absence of war, and any of us who work in war know that. The absence of war is the precondition for the possibility of sustainable peace with justice and equality. And that, don't waste time.
Jody,
Thank you.
I just want to touch on an issue, but very quickly if I can, because I do want to move on again. But another thing that you believe is that peace should be defined by human security, not national security. I just wonder how realistic that is, given the context of today's realpolitik and the US relationship, transactional relationship to many governments around the world, shall we say.
You know something? If you believe you cannot bring about change, you will not bring about change. I believe that when people come together with a common vision, we together can change the world. It may not happen in my lifetime because I am old, but I am willing to participate in the process so that someday it will be different. I think people are fed up with the notion that national security is the most important form of security, right? In my own country, if I go to the parts of the country that are ravaged by the collapse of the manufacturing sector, they have no future, their children leave because there are no jobs, and I say to them, are you feeling secure? They're not gonna say, oh God, I'm worried about North Korea and their nukes. They're gonna say, I can't feed my, what's left of my family. My children had to leave because there are no jobs. If I get sick, I die because I have no insurance and I have no money to pay for health care. That is real security. And if you want a stable society, you have to provide for the basic needs of the people of your country. And then, people get pissed off and do stuff, but it will not be the disenfranchised, the disempowered, the jobless, revolting against an elite few who have billions while I have 50 cents.
Yeah.
That's human security versus national security. Let's spend we spend 57% of the US budget on the military. And that does not include nukes, which is hidden in the Department of Energy. I could go on.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could do with that money.
And to add to that, in the last 2 years, apparently, according to the State Department, the U.S. has made $27.9 billion of foreign military sales to Saudi Arabia alone. And when you consider what's going on in Yemen, you wonder how much pressure can be brought to bear to change course. But talking about that human dimension, human security, Tawakkol, Karman, we talk about women and children often being the first victims of conflict and war. How do you pick up the pieces? How do you make sure that society as a whole is able to deal with this normalization of violence? How do you create a lasting peace in Yemen, in other words?
Okay, again, and I will not feed up from repeating this. Remember the early 2 years of Arab Spring. Remember the millions of people, the peaceful people that was demonstrating in the street against the dictators and against all the violence that they faced. They just was, just singing, chanting, being killed in the street while they raise the voice of peace. Why I'm saying that? I'm telling all the world from this stage, that peace is very possible in Yemen. Yemeni people throw more than 70 million of weapons, piece of weapons. And they faced all the kind of violence of dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh with peaceful way. President Munsaf al-Marzuqi said that he was very afraid about, oh my God, how is the revolution will be in Yemen? It's an armed society. How will they do? It will be a civil war. But the opposite happened. It was 100% of peaceful revolution. We didn't attack any police station. We didn't kill any soldier. So that is a very important evidence to the world that this armed society can create the peace. And also another evidence, inside, it was really, really a big challenge that to create a peaceful revolution in an armed society that has decades of revenge between tribes. And inside the revolution, in the camps, the tribes that has a lot of wars between each other, decades of wars, they came to the same square. They live under one tent. They eat with each other, sleep with each other, and died with each other. And this is bring a big evidence of Yemen want peace. And in transitional period also, we did the great work, and it was a really successful story. Even with Houthis, we called them, the peaceful revolution leaders called them, throw your weapons and come to us, demonstrate with us peacefully. They said, okay, they came. But now what is the problem? The problem that, and you can't imagine this, and this is, gave the solution. The problem became that they want Saudi Emirates first, and then Iran. And I agree with the people that then Iran. Because I blame Iran with all the problems in the region. I blame Iran with the problem even in Yemen. But I blame Saudi and Emirates first. Why? Because they are the one who encouraged Houthis to carry the weapons again, because they want to destroy the democracy in our country, and they want to influence their hegemony, and they want to occupy Yemen. From then Iran take the benefit. Oh my God! And this is the stupidness of Saudi and Emirates the Arab leaders in general. They gave her a gift. And she was very satisfied, very happy, and started to support them. Now, what is the solution in Yemen? First, you should know that Yemen is willing to create peace, and they will not just create peace, they will also, not just in their country, they will create peace in the region and in all over the world. How? It's very important those countries, United States, Europe countries, Canada, that they said, stop the war, okay, stop supplying Saudi and Emirates with weapons. You want to stop the war, stop supplying them with weapons. This is very, very important. And also, stop Iran from exporting weapons to the Houthis. This is number one. So we should withdraw. Saudi and Emirates should also. When we talk about stop the war, it is not just stop the missiles, stop the bombers. That's very important, but also is withdraw from Yemeni cities. So Saudi and Emirates should withdraw from all Yemeni ports, airports, and lands. They occupy my country under the pretext that they came to protect the legitimacy, while they weakening the legitimacy, and they prevent our president from return to Yemen. Our president now is under house arrest, not kind of house arrest in Riyadh. So they said, we are supporting him while he is denied to return to Yemen. So they have to withdraw from Yemen. So Houthis, they have to hand over their weapons and all militia. That is very important. So we, Yemeni, can't sit together in one table. So all the militia has to hand over their weapons. And we need, because you're talking about my vision or our vision as Yemenis, a lot of people sharing that, for sustainable peace. We need to form a national government from all the parties. This government has a lot of tasks. The first task that she has to do is to put the draft of constitution into the referendum, and also to organize the election, and form لجنة عسكرية, an army military commission that withdraw the weapons and also rebuild the new army. Transitional justice, 3 points for sustainable peace, because we are talking about how to create sustainable peace. This is the map.
Well, let me ask you a quick question on this,
Yeah.
if I can, because since you talk about sustainable peace, I wonder where justice fits within this. Should immunity be envisaged or even granted for major war crimes? War crimes, crimes against humanity have been repeatedly swept under the carpet in so many different conflicts around the world and in conflict resolution initiatives. Is it necessary, do you believe, to sacrifice justice for peace in some cases? Can a lasting, sustainable peace be achieved without justice, especially in a situation like Yemen's with civil war, even though I realize that you say that all parties are to blame, and UN experts themselves have said that possible war crimes have been committed by all the different parties, including the Houthis, but the fire is really, and the spotlight is really shed on the Saudi-UAE alliance for the indiscriminate killing of civilians in many instances.
I always believe that who sacrifice justice for peace lose them both. there is no peace without justice. And we have in Yemen the experience. We gave the dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh immunity. And we told him that, okay, yes, peaceful revolutionary people, we refuse this kind of immunity, but okay, we agreed, okay, let's make the agreement go. The agreement in general was good, except the giving Ali Abdullah Saleh the immunity. So they give him the immunity without anything in replace. Give him the immunity with all money with him, and with allowing him to play political rule. And he used this immunity to destroy the country. He made alliance with the Houthis. He made alliance with Saudi, with Emirates, so he used that. So here, the 4 point of sustainable peace, transitional justice. It's very important, transitional justice. And we should put the method to compensate the victims and to guarantee these crimes will not be repeated. The last thing is economy. Economy is very important. One of the most important things that make the transitional period collapse, in addition to the conspiracy, that the international community promised Yemenis that they will support the transitional period economically. But in fact, they didn't support it. They made the transitional authority alone, while they are, yes, corrupt, but they didn't do anything in the supporting the economy. So reconstruction, إعادة الإعمار, reconstruction and compensate Yemen. This is very important now. Compensating Yemen with all the, because Saudi and Emirates should be the first one who compensate Yemen of all the collapse, of all the damage that they cause of Yemen. Thank you.
And the paradox is quite interesting because the main players, the main actors who are actually perpetrating the violence in many instances are the ones who are putting up the money for humanitarian aid. So an interesting paradox there. But so picking up on your point,
it should be something they give it as it's the right of Yemen. It's not just gift
but who gives it? That's the issue. To you, Shirin, Ebadi, who can compensate Yemen for what has happened, the destruction that has taken place? And I know you've been very critical, obviously, of the Iranian government, who you say seeks to export the revolution in many different places of the Middle East. You also mentioned that blame can be spread all around. You did mention the responsibility of the UAE and Iran, but can the actions of either side really be equated when you've got that sort of targeted killings of civilians, school buses, funerals, weddings, hospitals? And the other point I want to ask you about is, were you today an international prosecutor? Who would you like to see in the dock? What form of justice do you believe would be best for Yemen's stability and social cohesion when the guns are silenced?
ببینید، وقتی که ما میگیم جبران خسارت، این خیلی ایدئاله که کشورهای متجاوز مثل عربستان و امارات و ایران و حتی آمریکا به خاطر فروش اسلحه بیاد خسارت بده.
So when we speak about compensation, well, it's very easy to say countries like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Iran, and also America for having sold weapons should compensate.
اما مسئله مهم مکانیزم حقوقیشه. آیا مکانیزم حقوقی وجود داره در این زمینه که بشود یک کشوری رو محکوم کرد؟
But the more important thing is the legal mechanism. Does such legal mechanism exist?
باید بگم که ضمن اینکه این حرف بسیار زیباست، ولی که هنوز مکانیزم های حقوق بین الملل خیلی ناقصه.
Although this may sound very well, but the mechanisms that international law recognizes are not that complicated.
برای اینکه ما در حقوق بین الملل یه اصلی داریم به نام حاکمیت ملی و هر چیزی، و این متاسفانه خیلی گسترده است و هر چیزی که به اصل حاکمیت ملی برخورد بکنه حقوق بین الملل ناتوان میشه.
Because we have a theory under national sovereignty, and whatever conflicts with national sovereignty cannot be resolved easily.
بحث‌های حقوقی که در این زمینه ممکنه وجود داشته باشه خیلی تخصصیه و من میترسم شما خسته بشید. اما من الان میخوام یک مسئله دیگری رو در زمینه عدالت مطرح بکنم.
So we're not going to get into legal discussions because that's very specific, but I want to speak about justice now.
وقتی که ما صحبت از عدالت میکنیم یک مسئله مجازات مجرمه و دیگری جبران خسارت قربانیان.
So when we speak about justice, we're speaking about punishment of the criminals and also about the victims and compensating the victims.
در مورد مجازات افراد مجرم بایستی یک لیمیتی قائل بشیم که تا چه حد از اعمال و تا چه افرادی می شود اینها رو مجازات کرد.
So when we speak about punishment, of course, there's a limit. Who and how are we going to bring the punishment to these people? And who were the people who were involved? Up to which level?
نظریه های حقوقی بسیار متفاوتی در این زمینه هست که من خلاصش رو میگم که میگن در بالاترین رده رو میشه مجازات کرد ولی کن بهتره رده های پایینتر رو عفو کنید برای اینکه جامعه آرام بشود.
So in brief, there are some people who think that the people at the high level should be punished, but we cannot punish everyone so that we can bring stability to the society earlier.
و در شرایط یمن قبل از هر چیزی بایستی همونطوری که گفتم همه کشورها برن بیرون و دیگه دخالت نکنن و بعد تازه این بحثا شروع بشه.
So regarding Yemen, all of the countries have to leave, and once they're gone, we're going to have to speak about justice.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to finish on that. Okay, well, a couple of more questions to either one of the panelists furthest to me. To you, Lima Bowi, I just want to ask you this. I know that you trained as a trauma counselor and worked a lot with child soldiers, and we know the devastating impact the Yemen war has had on children particularly. What advice do you give? How does a society actually deal with the traumatic effects, the psychological effects of a war like this?
I think one of the things that we have to be very mindful of, and I draw from our Liberian experience, immediately after the war, we came to the World Bank, and we had a whole list of issues that we wanted the bank to help us focus on. We were looking for resources for education, healthcare, and we had a long list, including ex-combatants care, trauma healing, all of these different things. And once we handed it to them, the first thing we heard was, go back and prioritize your priorities. So we had come with probably 20 priorities or 20 thematic concerns, and they told us to go back and cut it down to 3. The first thing you need to imagine is, when in cutting down, the list you're weighing now problems that has been created during the war against each other. So if you're looking at rape, and then you're looking at care of ex-combatants, which are you going to take? These are the people who rape these people. Should we prioritize their care against the care of this group of people? You know the answer is definitely no. So as we continue to prioritize over the years, we've seen the whole issue of ex-combatants come down, 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 to the point that we've never really tackled 12, how many years after our war, almost 14, 15 years after the war, we've never touched the whole issue of trauma healing for ex-combatants because we're busy dealing with the harm that they created. So these are things that we need to really be mindful of. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is that when you're looking at solutions for peace, we always never really consider the issue of diasporan versus those who stayed. Our ability to train and work with those who stay in country is key to the future leadership of the country. Because if you fail to prioritize education, healthcare, trauma healing, all of these different things, people outside, all of you fancy Yemenis sitting here with your Georgetown degree and Harvard degrees are thinking, after the war, I will go back in my suit and tie. And when there is a political process, people will definitely be anxious and they will be impressed with my credentials and they will want to vote for me. Think twice. Because there will be this conversation of those who stayed and supported us, who understand our issue. And then, so if they're choosing a leader who is half educated versus a leader who is educated, but if this half-educated person is the person in their opinion who stayed and understand their issue, they're definitely going to be voting for that person. So in terms of dividing or trying to find solution, let's prioritize those in their trainings, job market, what else can you do for them, education. The other thing that I want to talk about is nation building. Many years ago, when South Sudan was not a country, many of us outside were advocating for them to split apart. South Sudan, like Yemen, had one common enemy, North Sudan. Like the Yemeni people now have the North and the South. Once South Sudan came out of the Northern Sudan, everyone was talking about infrastructure development. We need roads, we need hospitals, we need schools. No one thought about nation building. These people had weapons in every home. Where they did not have a common enemy again, no one foresaw that they were going to turn on each other. So there is a need, as people talk about peace, and I have to say this, and I apologize and pardon my ignorance, but I think all of the conversation I've heard this afternoon since I came back, everyone is trying to shift the blame of the problem in Yemen as a proxy war. The question you must ask yourself, if you take out Saudi Arabia, if you take out Iran, if you take out all the Emirates, all of those who are participating, will the Yemeni people still have a problem? And I guess yes. Okay. So as we consider proxy war, I'm sorry, let's also consider how do we as Yemeni take responsibility, those in country, those in the diaspora, because it's only by seeing clearly that you all will be able to start that dialogue that will lead to nation building.
Very interesting thoughts here, Leymah Gbowee. I will put that to Tawakkol, Karman, but just in a second or two, because we are wrapping up. I'm sorry that we weren't able to open the floor to questions, but your thought, Jody Williams, because as you just heard here your colleagues say, we look at outside forces, but we should also look internally. Internationally, I know you know one thing or two about international campaigns with impact. What needs to happen to really bring this issue to the fore, to the consciousness of the global community? I mean, could you think of starting, the four of you, a campaign of let's stop the Yemen war? What sort of campaign can you think of?
Tawakkol would have to lead that one, logically.
What do you think needs to happen, in a nutshell?
I mean, meetings like this, conferences like this, discussions like this in the US, so people really begin to understand what's happening and the role of our country in it. Fighting very hard to get people from Yemen here to talk about what they're living. The panel of all women, which I really appreciated, by the way, talked about that a lot, that it was really difficult to not have people from Yemen to come and tell their own story. That's critical. The survivor, in the landmine campaign, it was the survivors who were powerful advocates and those living through the crisis, those struggling, the women struggling to keep their communities alive should be here telling people. They should be talking in Congress, all the things we know.
Okay. Well, so much more talking and acting. So to you finally, Tawakkol Karman, as we wrap up in the last minute or so, how much can Yemenis on their own, left to their own devices, actually solve this problem?
They will. Yemeni people can create peace, can build peace, sustainable peace, but the foreigners should take their hands from our country. And I want to say the final words that Yemen is facing, like another Arab Spring countries, an ugly counter-revolution. We are paying the price, high price, for gaining our freedom, democracy, and rule of law. We will not give up. So with all this war that happens as a result of the counter-revolution, Yemeni people will not give up. Yemeni people knows very well what is the meaning of revolution. This war is kind of the counter-revolution, and one day, very soon, we will win.
On this positive note, Tawakkol Karman, thank you very much. Lima Bowi, Shirin, Ebadi, and Jody Williams, thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
Before we go, just a few words in closing. First of all, I want to thank all of the people who put this together. You cannot imagine what this took and how fast we did it. And so from the Tawakkol Karman Foundation, Tel Vitali, Mani Lofti, and Maya Al-Jazara, sorry if I said those names terribly, and from the Center on National Security, Julia Tedesco, Jennifer Indig, and all of the students who helped us out, and most of all, Ibrahim Katabi. A few takeaways I just want to you have on your mind. These are the words that should come to mind when you think about this conference in addition to all these wonderful people. Number one, pessimistic optimism. Think about that one. We can come back in a year and talk about it, but it's one of the takeaways. Number two, justice versus security. Can't we have both? Number three, the role of women. And last but not least, and it's what I want you to go home with, the children. This is about the children now and tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Pat.